Do you think cheating can be justified when a person is in an abusive relationship? When you live in poverty and struggle to survive every day, cheating on your husband doesn't seem like such a terrible sin. Especially if that husband has made your life a living hell.
Thank you for watching my channel. I create videos for your enjoyment. Please subscribe if you want to support my efforts, it's very important to me. I apologize in advance for any mistakes, dubbing is done by neural network. Please point out mistakes in the comments so I can correct them.
My name is Elena. I am 28 years old and I live in a small industrial town in the east of Kazakhstan. There is nothing here, no work, no prospects, only gray 5-story buildings and abandoned factories. Our town used to be the center of metallurgical industry. Thousands of people worked here, life was boiling. But then the 90s came, the factories closed and the city began to die slowly. Now mostly pensioners and those who have nowhere to go are left here. Young people run away at the first opportunity, to Almaty, to Astana, anywhere as long as it is far away from here. I also dreamed of leaving. But I didn't have such an opportunity. Because I grew up in a family of alcoholics. My first memories are the smell of booze in the apartment, my parents screaming, the sound of breaking dishes. My father drank and beat my mother drank and paid no attention to me. I don't remember either of them ever hugging me or telling me they loved me. But I remember well how at the age of 5 I learned to hide under the bed when my father came home drunk and aggressive. At school I was an outcast, in old rags, always hungry. Other kids teased me, teachers looked at me with pity, but no one tried to help me. I learned to be invisible. I tried not to draw attention to myself at home or at school. I dreamed that someday I would grow up and go far away, where no one would know about my family. But my dreams remained dreams. After 9th grade I wanted to go to college in the regional center. But there was no money for that, and my parents didn't care about my education. So I stayed in my hometown. I got a job as a cleaner in a local supermarket, the only place where they took me without education and experience. And that's when Vazia came into my life. He was 25, working at the local factory, one of the few that were still functioning. Next to him I felt special and desirable for the first time. Vazia courted me beautifully, he gave me flowers, took me to a local cafe. He said I was the most beautiful girl in the world. And I was just grateful for the attention and affection I never got at home. When he proposed to me, I said yes without hesitation. I was 18 and I was sure that love would save us from all our problems. How naive I was. Everything was fine for the first few months. We rented a tiny dorm room, I continued working at the store. Money was scarce, but we managed. Vazia worked, I ran the household. In the evenings we walked in the park, dreaming of the future. I was happy and thought that my life was finally better. But then the crisis began. The factory where Vazia worked started layoffs. He lost his job and drank. And that's when I first learned how cruel he could be. It happened when I came home later than usual, there was a revision at the store. Vazia was already drunk. He accused me of loitering and hit me. He hit me hard. I fell, hitting my head on the edge of the table. I remember lying on the floor, feeling the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, and I couldn't believe this was happening to me. That the man I loved could do this to me. The next morning Vazia cried, apologized, swore that it wouldn't happen again. I believed it. I wanted to believe. I thought maybe it was just a breakdown over losing his job. But it happened again. Over and over again. From that day on, the beatings became a regular occurrence. Any excuse, I showed up late, I looked at him the wrong way, I didn't make dinner good enough, everything ended in blows. Vazia began to control my every move. He checked my phone, forbade me to communicate with my colleagues. If I was late at work even for 15 minutes, he would interrogate me. Once he caught me talking to my neighbor, an elderly man who simply asked me to help carry my bags. Vazia got so furious that he broke 2 of my ribs. I couldn't go to work for a week, explaining my bruises and contusions by falling down the stairs. The money I earned, Vazia took away and drank it. We lived on starvation. I often went to bed with an empty stomach, giving the last piece to him to avoid beatings. He forbade me to use cosmetics, saying that I was ugly enough, there was no need to wear makeup. My clothes became rags, but there was nothing to buy new ones with. I remember going to work one winter day in tattered boots. It was cold, my feet were so cold I couldn't feel them. But I was afraid to ask Vazia for money for new shoes. Several times the neighbors called the police when they heard me screaming. But Vazia always managed to keep the matter quiet. And then he would punish me for taking it out of the house. I tried to leave several times. But where to? I had no money, no education. My parents had drunk themselves to death, I had no friends. I was trapped. One day I plucked up courage and went to the local crisis center for women. But they told me that there were no vacancies and suggested that I come back in a month. I returned home, and Vajja somehow found out where I was. That night he beat me so badly that I couldn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. And so 5 years went by. 5 years of hell in a tiny room with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet. 5 years of fear and pain. I'd almost resigned myself to the idea that it would always be like this. That it was my destiny and nothing could be changed. I stopped dreaming of a better life, stopped hoping for something good. Every morning I woke up thinking about how I could survive the day. Every night I went to sleep praying that Vajja wouldn't come home drunk and angry. I became a shadow of myself. Skinny, frightened, with eyes always downcast. I was afraid of my own shadow, startled by any loud sound. And then a new guard appeared in our store, Murat. He was kind, always smiling, sometimes treating me to a bun from the cafeteria. Next to him I felt like a human being, not a doormat. At first I was afraid to even look in his direction. But Murat was persistent in his kindness. He didn't ask about the bruises that I didn't always manage to hide. He was just there, ready to listen if I wanted to talk. Our romance began suddenly. After the shift, Murat offered to walk me home. We walked through the dark streets, talking about everything in the world. And then he just took my hand. And that's when something in me broke. I burst into tears in the middle of the street. I told him everything, about Vajja, about the beatings, about my fear. Murat listened without interrupting. And then he hugged me tightly and said, "You don't deserve such a life." That night I didn't go home. We spent it in the security office of the store. It was uncomfortable, cold, but I felt safe for the first time in years. Our affair lasted 2 months. 2 months of stolen moments of happiness. Murat was gentle, caring. He didn't drink, he didn't hit me. He made me feel like a woman, not a piece of furniture. Murat showed me that life could be different. He took me to the movies for the first time in years. We walked in the park holding hands. He gave me small gifts, chocolate bars, cheap earrings. It was a real miracle for me. With Murat, I started dreaming again. Dreaming that one day I could leave Vasi and start a new life. Maybe even leave this town in search of a better life. I knew what I was doing was wrong. Cheating was wrong, that's what I'd been taught since I was a child. But next to Murat I felt alive. For the first time in many years I was not afraid to smile, to laugh, to be myself. But happiness couldn't last forever. Vajja found out about my infidelity. It happened on Friday night. I came home late, Murat and I were walking in the park. Vajja was waiting for me. He smelled of vodka, his eyes were cloudy. He stood up silently and walked towards me. I backed away, but he grabbed me by the hair and slammed me against the wall with force. And then he started hitting me. Over and over again. I don't remember how long it went on. At some point I lost consciousness. I woke up in the hospital. Multiple contusions, concussion, broken arm. The doctors called the police, but I was too scared to testify against Vasi. I was afraid that if he found out he'd kill me. While I was in the hospital, Vajja disappeared. He took all our meager savings, even sold the old TV set. When I returned home, I found all my belongings destroyed. Clothes cut up, makeup smeared on the walls. Whore was written in paint on the mirror. But Vajja didn't stop there. He told all the neighbors about my cheating. He called the store and said mean things about me. I lost my job. He even found my page in a social network and published there my intimate photos, which he secretly took while I was sleeping. I became an object of ridicule and scorn in our small town. Vajja stalked me, threatened me, promised to find and kill the whore. I was afraid to leave the house. Every night I woke up with nightmares. Murat was gone. When all this happened, I tried to contact him. But his phone was disconnected and the store said he quit. Apparently, he wasn't ready to deal with such a baggage of problems. I was left alone. No money, no job, no roof over my head. For a while I lived with random acquaintances, scraping by on odd jobs. For months I lived in a fog. I had to scrape by on odd jobs, scrubbing floors, handing out flyers. I slept wherever I could, either at acquaintances' houses or in the entrances. A few times I even had to sleep at the train station. I tried to find a normal job, but in our small town everyone knows each other. Rumors about my cheating spread quickly, and no one wanted to hire a whore. There were days when I seriously considered suicide. It seemed that there was no way out, that my life was finally ruined. But something inside me kept fighting, wouldn't let me give up completely. One day, when I was handing out leaflets near a supermarket, a woman came up to me. She introduced herself as Galina and said she worked at a crisis center for women in a neighboring town. It turned out that she was passing through our town and happened to hear the locals talking about me. Galina offered me help, a place in a shelter, psychological support, and legal advice. At first I didn't believe her. After everything that had happened to me, I couldn't believe that someone just wanted to help. But I had no choice. So I decided to take a chance. So I found myself in a nearby city, in a crisis center for women who had suffered domestic violence. For the first time in a long time I had a roof over my head and regular meals. For the first few weeks I was just coming to my senses. I slept a lot, cried. The psychologist of the center worked with me, helping me to cope with the consequences of the violence. Gradually I started to come back to life. There were retraining courses at the center, and I decided to learn the profession of a hairdresser. It turned out that I had an aptitude for it. 6 months later I was already working in a small hairdresser's shop. I rented a room in a hostel. Life was slowly getting better. But psychological traumas don't go away quickly. I was still afraid of men, flinched at loud noises. I had nightmares at night. Every day I struggle with the consequences of what I've been through. I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm still afraid that one day Vajja will find me. I'm trying to pick up the pieces of my life, but it's very difficult. Sometimes I think that I will never be able to recover from all this. I often wonder if that fleeting passion with Murat was worth it. Was I right to cheat on my husband even though he was cruel? I don't know. Sometimes I think that if I could go back I would just endure further. And sometimes I think those 2 months of happiness were worth all the suffering. I don't know what lies ahead. Will I ever be able to build a normal relationship? Will I ever find the strength to trust people again? But I do know one thing. I'm a survivor. Despite everything Vajja tried to do to me, I'm still here. I'm breathing, I'm moving forward. And maybe one day I can truly start a new life. I dream of someday being able to get a full-fledged education. Maybe even open my own little hair salon. I want to help other women in similar situations. But for now I'm just living, day by day, and hope that someday I can see the light at the end of this tunnel. You know, I often wonder how many other women like me live around us. How many of them endure beatings and humiliation every day with no way out? And what can we, as a society, do to help them? Maybe it's time to start talking about it openly? Stop pretending that domestic violence doesn't exist? Create a support system for victims of abusive behavior? I don't know the answers to these questions. But I do know that silence is not the answer. And if my story helps even one woman find the strength to leave her abuser, then all my suffering was not in vain. What do you think? What can be done to change the situation? And are you ready to help if you know someone who suffers from domestic violence?